Hey everybody, it is Friday and we're hanging out in the WordPress Friday Hangout. What's up, Victor?
What's up?
Are the weeks going fast or slow? I can't quite figure out. It feels like we're popping back on the show pretty quickly, but sometimes the weeks are dragging, so I'm not sure. I don't know what's
I'm
happening.
definitely felt like yesterday camp. Yep,
The
it's
sun's out though,
definitely
which is nice.
yeah, the sun's out. So hopefully I'll take
It
a slow
stopped
weekend.
raining
It's just been
after a month.
yeah, everything's a blur right now. So
Everything's a blur. Well, we're gonna have some fun today. We're talking about all the crazy things WordPress can do. WordPress can do what? Can do that? I mean, many of us that have been around the WordPress for a long time, we've seen some interesting things with WordPress, but I'm always really surprised by things that other people are doing that I'm not aware of, because obviously there's millions, hundreds of millions, I don't know, users of WordPress and people using it and building interesting things. And I'm sure there's services and apps we hit that are maybe WordPress behind the scenes, and it's not always as obvious. Certainly at WebDev, we've done some stuff that we could talk about, but let's have our guests come on because we want to dig into some of these fun, crazy things that you can do with WordPress and that we're doing out there. So, Seth Rubenstein, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Hi, thanks. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do? More specifically in the WordPress space.
Sure. So I've been using WordPress for, I mean, probably since 2005. I'm wearing the 20th anniversary
Yeah, old school.
sweatshirt this morning, so it's been a long time. I'm the lead developer at the Pew Research Center. I lead a team of 3 other developers, and we build a WordPress kind of publishing platform for peer research, which many of you might know. We're kind of a nonprofit news organization.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's we're looking forward to kind of digging into some of the interesting things going on. I know Victor's a bit of a bad scientist when it comes to all things technology. I have a feeling
yeah, and
Victor might
that's
have a
actually
couple
why
things he wants to talk about.
yeah, and that's why when I saw, it's funny, I some of my favorite people on, Twitter, like I don't work in WordPress professionally day to day. I work for Sotheby's doing data architecture, right? And so, but it's exciting to see what's going on in WordPress because I see it as like the number one CMS. And even when I've evaluated others for organizations, like I always love WordPress, but then I do love saying to people, even my little brother, he's with I'm helping with a startup right now. And every time his investors are like, well, or when are we going to get off WordPress? We're going to need to add this. And I'm like, WordPress can do that. And they're like, oh, we need to add a form. WordPress can do that. Oh, we need circle style profiles. BuddyPress can do that. And I think one of the reasons that a lot of people don't realize they can do these things is because they may not be a more advanced engineer or no one's written these articles. So I'm excited to have someone like yourself who's like, hey, look, here's a unique problem that we had, and here's how we came to that approach, right? And here's how we did that in WordPress. And also, like you can do these things in WordPress. I think a lot of people get intimidated, but they don't have, one of us from this call like showing them how they did it or talking about how they approached it. So yeah. Yeah, the mad scientist stuff is cool, but it's great to also get a peek under the hood of how they did
there's
it.
so much, like, because I think you're right. Out of the box, WordPress, people look at it as a content management system, which of course it is, as a an app that can build and launch many different websites, and but I don't think people. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think by and large, most people don't think beyond that, right? Like, because WordPress is just a really good, like, if you strip out the display side, just go down to the basics of what it is. It's an amazing starting point for really building anything, right? Like, you have users with permissions, right? You have the ability to have content generated. You have easy ways to push and pull data via the REST API, or even XML RPC if you want to get really wild. But I don't know what you
GraphQL if you
would.
want to, and that's a quick
GraphQL if you're
add-on.
going more headless route. So, like, it just does a lot of things really well. It doesn't always have to be just a traditional, here's a website with a contact form and, my blog archive. So, and that's what I think the point of the show today is kind of dig into some of these interesting things and start, getting everyone to think a little bit differently about how WordPress works, type of things it can do. And maybe, you can bring this into the projects and stuff you're doing. So, who's got something interesting they want to kick it off with? Where we want to start with? Victor, Seth, who's got a cool project, something we want to show off or talk about? Getting WordPress a little outside of the norm.
I mean, the one thing, first thing I want to share, I guess, to kind of, and I don't mean to like say that they did it because they're not even WordPress. The project, in my opinion, that kind of kicked off the whole headless, and then also people starting to think about integrating WordPress outside of like the standard CMS. Brad, can I get screen sharing capabilities? I'll share and I'll demo.
That's
Yeah.
a no from me, dog. I'm just kidding. You should have it. No. Oh, I know why you don't have it. I know why you don't have it.
Brad didn't bump my permissions. He didn't
There
he
you
didn't make
go.
me a boss. Now
I'll
I'm
do
a
the same
boss.
for
All
you,
right, here we
Seth,
go.
too. So
All right. So yeah, and I got everything. So, and this article covers it, but when this was meant, it's crazy to think in 2015, and that's when I really went, head first into WordPress. The minute the REST API came, and so us too. And for people who are like, oh, WordPress is slow, WordPress doesn't look snappy. This article, and you can look it up. It's WP Tavern, us too. But they actually published their entire open source kit. They worked with Human Made. They wrote an article about open source in the website. I will say, if you look back at this, it's almost like this is so complicated. And now there's services that do this for you. And so when I say that, it's like, look at this WordPress this is a WordPress website, but this is the REST API. And it has routing, and this is all WordPress, but this is headless, right? And I think what's so cool is, and because everyone keeps changing their sites all the time, they did have at one point some kind of interactive elements that were pulling from an API. And so each of these, what it's doing is just pulling posts, pages, etc. But that was like the first time I got really excited about using WordPress like headlessly. So that's the first thing I want to show. But I also do have, Seth, if there's anything you want to run through here, if you want to take over.
Sure,
like talk
absolutely.
About,
I think what's interesting is you were talking about WordPresses can do this and this and this. It's not just a CMS. And I think in the kind of Gutenberg era, one of the things that I approach WordPress as is it's the complete toolkit. Because now with WordPress components and things like that, you have now UI components. You have a kind of user interface paradigm to build interfaces for end users that we really never had. Definitely didn't have that when it was just shortcodes and stuff like that. So it's not just content management. It's not just user management. It's the whole toolkit. And we try to use it as a whole toolkit at Pew Research. So I'd be happy to show the quiz system.
I'll let you take over so you can demo that.
there you go. Should be able to take over, Seth.
All right. So this is definitely one of our top kind of performing pieces of content every single year. And it's a quiz where you go through, you answer some questions. We kind of lump you in different political categories. People love it. And we make a lot of these actually. And so the problem was, well, this required a developer every single time we wanted to make a quiz. And that was just not something that we could sustain. So we built out a block-based quiz builder. I'm just going to run through it real quick. None of these are actual answers that I agree with or anything. I am just clicking answers. So let me just run through this real quick. But what's nice is that an editor can go in here and kind of type all this out, select what are the right answers. There's also the ability to kind of make questions display conditionally based on the answer that someone has provided. And so in many ways, that kind of an editor can drag and drop a little application, a little web app for people in the back end. Let me just run through this and we'll get to the results page. And so when we click submit, obviously we gather up all your answers, REST API request to a custom endpoint that we have that stores your answers in a database. We grade your answers, and these have right answers or anything, but we compute your kind of matrix for where to place you in things. And then the results page also is something that the editors can kind of drag and drop, build out. Maybe they have a style tweak to do after launch. That's no problem. Go in there and do it. So it's pretty complex kind of stuff happening on the back end. But on the front end, like you said, you really wouldn't know that this is kind of just like a WordPress thing. It just kind of seems like a JavaScript application. But on the back end, it's all WordPress. So let me dive into how this is actually built.
That's cool.
So
that's the thing. Like a lot of people see stuff like this, and that exactly what you just said, right? The initial reaction is this is obviously couldn't be WordPress, could it?
Or you might think, someone manually built this for this page and just placed it here. And no, an editor built this.
And I guess for anyone listening to this, there's value in this because so many times I'll have a client come to me outside of like my day job. I do freelancing and I have a small agency, and they'll say, hey, can you build me a quiz, or do you know a React developer? And I'm like, I don't know if we need to like a whole, like, I mean, I React developer in WordPress. I'm like, we could build the quiz once, or we could build it in WordPress so you could build as many quizzes as you want. Why are you going to hire someone? And you'll see people on Upwork pay $2,000 for this, for one implementation, and the engineer, they need to call it just to change a question. And that's the beauty of WordPress. Like, I think not enough people sell that. And I've said this before, WordPress's competitive advantage is not the render, it's the CMS.
Yeah. Well, it's the customization. It is whatever you want to do. Literally, it's a blank canvas. Go to town, you know? So especially one of the nice things about Gutenberg is you kind of get one-to-one, and I'm going to add another thing, one representation across, right? What you see in the editor is about what you're going to get for the front end. And then also kind of, I'll show you another example of our chart builder, what you can maybe do dynamically using PHP, using blocks, which I think maybe is an area that people are not exploring enough of. So the structure is pretty simple. Basically, we have what we've kind of coined internally as a controller block. We use this concept a lot where you'll have kind of one block that kind of controls your front end view as you're going through it. And then it contains all your kind of inner content blocks. So we have a couple controller blocks in here because this is a pretty complex thing to build out every single time. So you have pages. We do have a system that lets you build out group results as well. So, you know, we have an account system, so you could go in there and say, I'm making this for my high school politics class. We actually have a lot of high schools and kind of college professors that use this in their class. And they can type in their class name, and then they get a results page that shows them everyone else's results in their group. So that's also a kind of cool feature. But as you go through here, you can, you know, create a new answer, say it's correct, assign it points. This is how we compute the matrix on the back end. So there's just like, I could go through all these different features. There's a lot of different features, but I guess the coolest part is that, you know, you're seeing the interface here and you just saw the quiz.
Right,
for the most part, this is what it looks like.
Yeah. Like I've seen some of this in other areas, but it's always, you know, in a special section of setting up like questions and a quiz, and then you have to basically like short code it or embed it. So you're not actually working in the editor when you're working on this. You are working in some other area and just embedding it. So it's kind of a disconnected experience, but this is awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. And
I'll also add, you really took advantage of, and this is like, if you ever listened to the show before, I'm always ripping WordPress UI because people bring custom stuff and you don't need to. You have your, and now I see there's some custom icons. Like, I don't think I've seen those icons in the WordPress library before, but you didn't try to like shove your icon and make it big and blow out that you made it fit the Gutenberg design.
Yeah.
So what, and like on the top, I see the add new quiz. You didn't add a custom button, a cartoony thing. I'm not going to call it certain plugins, but like you didn't need to call attention. You made it fit in there. So the other benefit, in my opinion, when you build things like this, it's the idea of like, hey, WordPress already has, and with Gutenberg, has its own component system. But if you stick to their component system, it makes it easier for these users. So these users must love this because it's a familiar system. Like Brad said, they don't have to learn. Yeah, people don't realize, like, every time you add a new top level menu item in the admin that has a totally different interface, like the way most in my like WordPress people, in my opinion, would approach this is doing super custom, but you just adopted Gutenberg and made it work for your user experience, but kept the same UI components, which is really great.
Yeah, I mean, and where we can, you know, we tap into core blocks too. You know, we've built a big block library, and actually the thing that's holding up us releasing the block library, I've talked about it a lot over the last year, is the icons, because these are fun, awesome icons, and I don't want to get in trouble licensing wise, so I need to figure out a way to kind of load these without having the actual SVGs in there. But yeah, so we do try to stick to the Gutenberg UI because that's just like, you know, training overhead that we don't need. You're already writing paragraphs. You know how to insert an image, you know how to do videos, and you know how to do all this other stuff. So we try to adhere to that as close as possible. But we do take some liberties. One thing that I'm actually pretty proud of, and this is talking about, you can do that with WordPress, is all the new APIs in Gutenberg that kind of let you traverse the interface. So one of the things I talked about is the conditional display questions. So this right here is one of those questions that kind of has a condition on it. And we're using block variations for this, so that if a question is kind of set to be conditional, it just has a different block variation so that we get different interface, a different icon, it's yellow. You get a different kind of label, single choice question, conditional. and these are just easy things to tap into, right? This is just a couple lines to create a new block variation. And now we have a completely different interface that we don't have to manage, that Gutenberg's managing for us. So I could go on and on about the quiz builder. It is kind of my pride and joy. I guess let me show.
I'm curious, was there an iteration of this prior to Gutenberg or some other system you used? What did that look like just in comparison?
So this is probably kind of the fourth iteration of this system since I joined the center. So when I joined the center 8 years ago, this was mostly a developer-driven process. There was kind of a loose system to create the quizzes and the data structure and all this stuff. But it was PHP files that had to be uploaded to the server, and all the questions loaded in there and stuff like that. And it just didn't scale. So when I joined, I quickly cobbled something together using Gravity Forms, actually, because they had a nice little quiz add-on, they had a survey add-on, all this stuff. And so it was just making the interface work for us. And that worked for a while. But then once we started kind of building out our block library and say, hey, we're going to go all in on Gutenberg, then it was, well, how can we do this using blocks? And this was actually kind of our first attempt at how do we make web applications using Gutenberg? How do we empower our producers and our editors to kind of just drag and drop something? Now you've got an interactive thing that does something and stores data and handles all that on the front end as easy as possible. So this was the first of that for us. But this plugin itself is on its third iteration right now.
Yeah,
I think it's funny you talk.
Super cool.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I think it's funny you talked about Gravity Forms. That's actually something I have a former student of mine that I'm mentoring in building a business, and he was going to use WooCommerce, and I said, dude, you're just making custom jackets. Let's prototype it in Gravity Forms and iterate on Gravity Forms. And then you could build out your WooCommerce site because you don't even know what kind of data you need to collect through your business process. And a lot of people don't understand. You could prototype with Gravity Forms, WordPress plus Gravity Forms. You could rebuild a lot of apps out there. I think it was Nat Militech or someone made a joke that the internet literally is just a bunch of form systems. And so in reality, this is like you've built a form. A quiz is a form, right? But with a structure. And so, it's funny. Gravity Forms, you can prototype a lot with it. And I think that's a great way also internally at a company to campaign for something. I remember, when at big orgs, even though we don't use WordPress, sometimes I'll prototype something in WordPress to demo to my React and Python engineers to say hey, this is what I'm looking at and I want, let's do it in this,
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the point too around, I think you said something to the effect of, it can reduce training. This is the familiarity of Gutenberg. You train users on Gutenberg and then they're inherently going to, start to understand how to work with different systems in Gutenberg versus also training them in Gravity Forms or some other system. Probably makes permissioning a little bit easier, right? Because now you're at the content layer versus admin setting screens that you got to worry about what can they see or not see. And, so I think it does simplify it quite a bit. This is neat because I feel like I have not even just I think of premium products and stuff out there. I haven't seen anyone really going all in the Gutenberg editor, and I'm curious if that's a path we might see for some of the products out there. If they start seeing stuff like this to see it's doable,
Yeah.
And in the chat, Laura Byrne just said she's seen so many clunky quiz generators. And I'll say to you, I've generated quizzes with Gravity Forms, and it's still clunky. It's not a great interface for people to edit.
Yeah, because it definitely feels like this is because it's a form builder, right? This is you are building an old school kind of HTML form, right? And that is what Gravity Forms does super well. I'm not knocking Gravity Forms. I actually love Gravity Forms. But for that really immersive touch is what we are kind of always going for. And that just wasn't possible. I don't know where Gravity Forms is today. I don't know if they've kind of deeply adopted blocks yet or not. When we were
they have Gravity Forms I will say, and back to what Brad said, one of my so I'm I always, one of my evaluation things for a plugin, does it have documented permissions? And there's there's ubiquitous plugin redirection, right? Which I think I'd argue redirection is a very powerful thing in the wrong hands, and the permissions on that are very different. It's not it doesn't have granular permissions. It'd be great if there was view redirects so that someone could document, edit, redirects, delete. They don't have those. You have to add them yourself. Whereas Gravity Forms has permissions down to who can add a button. There's crazy. And so that is they do a really good job of making it easy to provision Gravity Forms, but not every plugin does that.
Yeah. One quick shout out real quick for a plugin that does do permissions super well that we just kind of adopted recently, Newsletter Glue. I don't know if you've looked at that.
I've
Yeah,
seen it.
that's
My
a great
brother's looking
product
at that,
from
yeah,
Leslie in the group
it's a
over
very
there.
cool product,
Yep.
and they do permissions super well. So just shout out to them real quick, because they give you
Well, I mean,
an
they're
interface in
hitting
the back end. You can
newsrooms.
say,
They have to. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
like, and I feel like that's smart. And it's funny because I remember Elementor did not have all the way down, unless they were subscriber, they could edit things. And I remember being like, and I actually say that to people, I feel like permissions are one of the you go to any training, by the way, all like the top training courses on Udemy, the top selling WordPress Udemy courses, none of them cover permissioning and user roles.
Yeah.
It's all just how to build CPTs, how to add this, how to that, but not how to build like, hey, we need editors. We need not just editors, but let's say like graphic artists who go in here, video people can only do this. I remember, when I did something I did like provision to only legal teams could only edit legal docs, which is nothing more than a clone of
SEO
page,
team or
right?
social or whatever.
Yeah, or the SEO team. And no one covers that. So permissioning is like a really difficult thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
what else? I want to see this chart builder. That's
yeah,
another
because
thing
if you're excited about
pumped.
this, so this, I want to show this off. This is actually a kind of product that's been in development for about 2 years now, by one of our senior devs, and we kind of just actually like launched this yesterday, where we're going through and we're going to convert a bunch of our old charts to this now. So we're kind of have an editorial effort underway. So I'll show you one page that has been converted to this new chart builder. I think this is actually probably one of the more exciting things. As much as I love the quiz builder, this is pretty cool. I have not seen anything close to this in the WordPress space. So this is a very simple chart. I could probably throw together some more complex visualizations, but at Pew, we do a lot of charts. It's kind of our bread and butter, data visualization. So we've had a chart builder product for a long time, and it was throw in an HTML table and here's some toggles. We used advanced custom fields for a lot of the fields for that. Also, everybody knows that, great product. But we wanted to make it blocks. We want everything to be blocks. So this is a quiz, pretty simple. I'm not going to go through, all the different visualizations options here. What's really interesting, obviously, is the editing interface. So don't mind, we do have our own tabs block we've built out. Happy to also show more of our block library. But this is our chart builder block. And I think what's really amazing about it is, let me bring up the block control. What you see is what you're going to get. And that's just something we've never had. So we can, modify this a little bit if we want here. We can maybe change how it's being sorted. However we want to do this stuff. We can turn off different, data points in the chart. We can change the size of the tooltips.
This is slick.
Down to everything. And what's amazing about this is everything that's being kind of rendered here is off of a library called Visix. It's a React charting library. This is just a straight up SVG. You can take what is being output here, and then a designer can take this into InDesign. And if there's something that can't be achieved here in the editor, they can go further and add additional things to the chart. Maybe it's maybe it is a tooltip that kind of needs to be statically paid. That's there all the time, right? Stuff like that. So this is actually a really exciting tool for us, because this isn't just, hey, we're making content for the public. This is we're potentially making a tool here that could replace something like Adobe InDesign inside of our organization. And that's being done in Gutenberg.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it just shows the flexibility of what's possible within blocks, and really the sky's the limit, right? So I like seeing these more advanced blocks, integrations, making life easier for, the content writers, the editors, people putting this data out there. I mean, I got to believe this is saving hours, tens of hours, hundreds of hours, over time, like putting this together versus whatever you were probably using before.
Well, before it was, a lot of it was save as draft preview, save as draft preview, save as draft preview. And that does take time. And that, that's just not a smooth experience. There's a lot of friction in that. So.
Yeah,
I also
that's
like
why
how
the
the
power
chart
of this
is
just to shave off that time, because it does add up, and it does make for, again, a better experience for not only the people putting this content together, but the people, reading this content on the other side.
Well, how many, I don't know in different kind of organizations you've worked, how many times is it where WordPress is the last part of the process, where content's created in Microsoft Word or Google
or
Docs
Google
or something
Docs.
like
Yeah.
that, and they just
Mhm.
copy and paste it over. And we still have that problem too, but because of blocks and because of kind of the fidelity that we're providing here, we now have people who are we're ready. We're ready to kind of start moving into that position where WordPress is the first place that you work,
Yeah,
not the last
I think
place.
we're all looking forward to that. And that's a great point, because I know one of the big initiatives, either it's upcoming or that maybe they've already started digging in, is the collaboration of being able to edit, multiple users being able to edit the same post, just like in Google Docs or Office Online or something, where you can collab with multiple people. And that's the beauty of it, right? Same thing for us. We start our blog posts in Google Docs, so we can comment, we can collab,
Right.
and then when we're get it to about 95%, then we start bringing it over to WordPress and start mapping it out. Right. But you're right. I would love it where WordPress is the first and only place we have to put our content together. And I think that co-collab piece that's coming,
that is key.
and more powerful stuff like this, just it all works and get, works towards that point of getting people into WordPress first and only WordPress.
I think this also goes beyond, and this is what we were starting to do at the Wall Street Journal and News Corp, going beyond the idea of embeds. Because originally, like you were saying, not just copy pasting, but that's what WordPress was: embeds via short codes, via iframes, via whatever, right? And then the beauty, and I think this is one of the things WordPress can do that. One of my favorite things to tell people is we had a chart builder at Dow Jones, at News Corp, but it wasn't interactive on the front end. But one of the things we did was that when we had a lot of expensive APIs, and they would try to do interactive on the front end and render that, but it didn't need to be rendered because the journal didn't have interactive charts, right? And so it was costing money to like hit the job, render that chart, spit it back out as an image every single load. So with WordPress, we were able to let them choose the charts, choose the data, and then it would display it in a certain way. It wasn't as interactive as that. You could only put like, hey, bring in this, put the dates in, and it would, give you like a line chart. But then when it would store it, and this is what Gutenberg allows, because it has save, I forget, I haven't done it, edit and save as the two, and it would save it to the door. We would save it as an image instead of saving it as data. And so that way on the front end, because it was a headless integration on the Wall Street Journal, it would, on the front end, they wouldn't render the API, they would render just the image. And so there's a lot of stuff. You can like print a flat file. I don't know if you call it that terminology, but like you can, save things as an image on the back and do all that rendering on the back end. And it saves you so many resources too. Like you were saying before, something with SVGs. Now I see this, I'm like, oh, wow, like that's even better. Because now if you're doing a headless application or a headless WordPress, you can, send SVGs, send chart data, if the same chart data on both ends. And again, like I think only WordPress can do that. When like we were saying before, people are buying, a custom React application with like, a custom chart builder for their site, and it's still embeds. Whereas like if they, paid someone to build it in WordPress, they have all those kind of nice savings and a built-in, and like Brad said, user roles, all this stuff. And I don't see any other system that has this out of the box. That's why sometimes when people are like, oh, Craft CMS, oh, React this thing, I'm like, where's all this is all missing, where you're missing a lot of stuff here, and it's stressing me out. And then you have to add all these libraries you don't know about. But WordPress, it's like old reliable.
Yeah. Well, and with all those other systems, there's a bunch of stuff missing. You're going to have to go build, and here the toolkit is, all that stuff's available for you. All the basics are there, and they're done really well. They're tested. They're tried and true. This example, this is just a kind of little caveat here to the chart builder thing. One of the things that I'm not seeing a lot of, because I don't think there's good documentation on this, this is a lot of experimentation, is how to use the blocks that you're generating, in this kind of React editor interface. How can you dynamically generate those using PHP? And so in this case, all these charts are actually not editor driven. These are just pulling from an SQL database that we have. Long story short, a lot of this code that I'm showing here today, we are going to open source. I'm just dealing with a lot of kind of the licensing legal stuff right now.
We're going to ask if there's an opportunity or
someone asked that, of course.
So
to release this.
How we're doing all this, we will be able to show soon.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, it's great. I mean, we love seeing this stuff. Obviously, hearing that things are going to be contributed back in an open source way is even better, right? That's why we're all here. So, but I also know the sensitivity of internal stuff and then releasing it. There is usually a bridge that needs to be gapped there. So, totally get it. Yeah, this is awesome, man. I really excited to see kind of the powerful. This is some of the probably more advanced stuff I've seen in Gutenberg directly. Honestly, I can't think of anything that's kind of gotten to this level of advanced functionality within Gutenberg directly that I've seen. There could be stuff out there, but this is awesome. And this is the type of stuff we like talking about and showing. And I'm excited about this type of show because it gets ideas going in people's heads of, oh,
Yeah.
I saw what Seth's doing over here. We could do that, on our projects. Let's dig in and see what's going on and how we could do that. So sometimes it's just kind of almost giving people permission, like, yes, it can do crazy stuff like this and do it very, very well.
Yeah, it's not just for blogs. It's not just for blogs. You got to keep telling yourself that it can do so much
for
more.
blogs. It's not just So awesome. Well, thanks for that, Seth. I got one. I'll pop on and show off here. Let me share my screen. You guys shared so well. Here we go. So I can't demo the actual project, and I'll explain why. But this is a couple years ago. We did an actual app for the YMCA, and now this is an app that runs on an iPad. And the idea was, this is an MVP program, but the idea was to try to get kids more into fitness, right? And how do we get kids excited about fitness and want to come to the gym and want to play basketball and want to swim, and gamification, make points, right? So the idea is we built this system where you could log in with your YMCA card. You click login and the camera actually pops up and you hold up your card and it scans the UPC, logs you right in using, WordPress accounts. And it's essentially an app wrapper around a website. So what we're seeing is WordPress. And I would encourage you, if you check out the video that goes into it in a little more detail. But what allowed students to do, or kids that were members of the YMCA to do, is when they come, they could sign in and then they could log the activities that they do while they're there. They could earn points. Points could be redeemed for merchandise and swag and other benefits. So it gave the kids a little bit of incentive, and sometimes that's all you need to get kids to do something. Give them a little bit of incentive. Here's a lollipop, right? You give them a little carrot and then away they go. So the idea was just get them to more fitness. But to the normal user, I remember demoing this to Matt Mullenweg, and he's like, cool, why are you showing me this? And we're like, it's WordPress. And he had it, like, you could just see this, like, oh, really? Like, it was all WordPress, and it worked really, really well. We used some WordPress and BuddyPress. We used Badge OS, which is a gamification plugin that we helped build with Credly back in the day. So again, just a very different way of using WordPress, an app wrapper. Everything about this looked like a traditional app, the way it worked, the way you swiped, everything. So to the normal user, they just assumed it was an app when it really was not. We also did a similar thing for the Dallas Museum of Art, which was another app wrapper. And the idea here is they would have at the museum, they had iPads around the larger exhibits throughout the museum, and you could check in to each of those exhibits and earn points, earn badges. We could redeem those points, but so you can see it might be hard to read on the screen, but select 10 or more works you love. And so if you check into like 10 or more, stations and pieces of art that you really like, you would earn the 250 points. You'd earn the collector badge. Again, it's a way to get, people at the museum more interaction, and maybe even go look at some art that maybe they wouldn't have been drawn to initially, but they want to earn some points, right? So again, totally 100% WordPress. On the back end, looks like a traditional app that they would run across all of their iPads. It's a nice little couple videos here that really show, demonstrate how it works. But again, it's just an app wrapper installed like a normal app on these iPads, and it just pulled up the website that was WordPress. So really thinking outside the box here, but using that power of WordPress and what it brings to the table: content types, user accounts, all that stuff. Badge OS for the gamification. This was really a big hit, and it was a lot of fun to build just because it's so outside of the box.
Yeah, those are cool.
Yeah. So let me.
How did you handle the UPC scanning?
So we actually were able to integrate with the camera on the phone, and basically it just passed in. I'm trying to remember exactly how it did. The accounts were attached to WordPress user accounts. So basically that was their unique user ID for the YMCA, and that's all they needed to log in. So it's not logging in the traditional way of like the WordPress dashboard. It's just saying, hey, here's Brad, here's his unique ID at the YMCA, and anything I track is going to go against that unique ID. So it's a pretty easy and simplified authentication system.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I love
thinking outside the box, got
to
show off some cool stuff like that and get people thinking about what's possible with WordPress.
Yeah,
we got next.
Kind of physical implementations of WordPress too. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I also want to share, I guess, similar to what Brad said, and it was kind of bummed me out when we got on the call. I was like, I spent the week trying to get together the cool stuff that happened, but just like, and this is actually, I guess, related to this. So for example, BuzzFeed News is getting killed, right? Vice, what people don't realize is like, they're also just going to spin that down. Whereas the New York Times and the Washington Post, all these other publications, they still keep like the microfiche record at libraries. So it's almost like and not to get like be dramatic, it's almost like the Library of Alexandria being burned 100 more times. You know what I mean? Because like that's how much data and information's out there. And so some articles like this, I worry about Medium getting taken down. So the Museum of Sydney, they were using GraphQL to build out their digital displays at the museum. And so they had the Powerhouse Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, Victoria, Cooper Hewitt, Rijksmuseum, and the Brooklyn Museum that were all part of, I guess, this group. And so they built an API, and then they were using the REST API to like highlight objects, and then they would in this article they literally go through of how they built the API, right, for this museum, for physical space, for like discovery. So when people are on the displays, they can go through and see what's in the collection and where to find those items in the collection. So they were used in the catalog, right? And I thought that was like, and I was like, man, this is, and I remember someone presented about another museum, and we spoke about this before we jumped on the live stream. The Bethlehem Train, I think it was Train or Steel, they had a museum with the REST API endpoints where instead of using, you know, and if you read, I'll put this article in, I'll tweet this one out. You know, they were talking about what data is available. And like, this is title and slug. Anyone that's worked in WordPress knows this kind of stuff, right? And the other thing I'll add, what Brad was saying, the thing I love about WordPress is the ubiquity, right? Like a lot of developers don't realize when you're selling an application, they just sell the application. Like, here it is. And let's say we're just selling a quiz, right? Here's your quiz. The client's going to come back to you and say, how do I change that? How do I change that? And some developers love that, but there's value in selling it as a CMS. And with WordPress, you throw a rock in Brooklyn, you're going to find someone who knows how to use WordPress, right? And so that's the beauty of the ubiquity. And that's what museums and nonprofits love it, right? And so, yeah, this was my favorite. But, and again, like you could see how they started adding metadata for the endpoints, designer, maker, year, country. And so WordPress has that built in, and it was one of the only things. So, and it's unfortunate. I feel really, I went to their site and nowhere in the site are they using anything that I could indicate, you know, that I could tell was WordPress, but that's, I guess, the beauty of it. I don't know if this, maybe the API is all still controlled by WordPress, but they just haven't the budget, right? Another thing too, that you were sharing with like the chart builder. And again, I don't have access anymore. This was a very large client that I helped recruit like 5 engineers for them for WordPress. And so they have a marketing team, they have like a backend team, a CMS and an LMS. But all of this is Gutenberg. This is a custom Gutenberg slide builder. This is a custom tab system pattern. With like all, and like they can go and it auto optimizes the images. Obviously there's some stuff going on here. It's hooked up with Cloudinary. So like, you know, it goes to a CDN and a DAM. These used to count up. Let me see if it does it again. Some of these are like breaking now because we did hand off. This was actually kind of, we handed off to their, yeah, here we go. That's WordPress. They put, and it, again, we made it simple. This was ACF where like, give a floor, a ceiling, and that's and then the number you want rendered at the end. And so that's what that is there. All of this is Gutenberg. We didn't use any Beaver Builder. We didn't use any, we just used ACF or we, you know, and again, this was like 2 years ago that we built this, but because we built it with ACF and stuck to core, they haven't called us, which I guess is kind of annoying, but also kind of, hey, great job. We built it so easy. They can hire anyone to do it. And then the other thing with like, when people say like WordPress can do what, I get so many times where people say, oh, we want to have like, a custom page of like our jobs. And so for the careers page, I don't know, again, with layoffs, I don't know who has careers anymore. This is actually a Gutenberg block, if it still is here on the job listings, that is pulling from the Greenhouse API and just listing out jobs. So if I go to see more open roles, yep, this is pulling, this is using, and again, like we're lazy. We used Facet WP, right? And so this is Facet WP calling to an external API that is pulling in the jobs from Greenhouse. And then they can sort through it. And we did, you know, we pulled in the taxonomies from, you know, the Greenhouse API and then rendered it here. And what that does is like when people like, again, WordPress can do that. this makes it so that the jobs team never has to go into the WordPress website. And so when we were sitting down, we're like, and then the CMS team is able to put the jobs wherever they want. Right. And so it makes it where people can work where they want to work. And again, this is like the power of a WordPress CMS. And this was one of the coolest things we built. And it was exciting because I just come off the Wall Street Journal. This was like 2020, and like everyone was laying off development teams, and then they needed contractors to wrap it up, and I took an opportunity. And so all of this, even this resource section, and this is like one of probably the coolest sites we built, the resource section, which is taxonomies to break it into, there's a CPT of events and webinars, but then there's also a CPT of resources with custom taxonomies of like, location, company, whatever. And then as you're going through, if I go to like, the FSC Banking Summit, that's using Marketo, but some of these resources, because they have a related taxonomy, right? And this is the hot thing right now outside of WordPress, even content customization and personalization. You see Twilio doing this, Salesforce selling this, and then AI developing those user personas. In this, they're using HubSpot with content conditionals. And so depending on how you interact with this whole website and what content you read, it will render certain things. So if I go to this interactive app and I scroll and explore the app, like it should be showing different CTAs. And so that was like all built. This is all WordPress, and it's on Pantheon. It was pretty neat.
A little disclaimer: if you throw a rock in Brooklyn, and even if you hit a WordPress developer, they're probably going to kick your ass.
Yeah, don't throw a rock. You know what I mean?
Don't throw rocks, people. No, that's super cool. I love seeing stuff like that. And you know what's interesting? Some of the stuff we've been showing off is like, like Seth, you're actively working on it. It's very new. And some of the stuff is, like you said, a couple years old, and it's still super interesting what people were doing even a couple years ago with Gutenberg.
I mean,
and I think back then people were still kind of like not they didn't know if they were hot or cold on Gutenberg. So, but seeing that people were still going all in, and now that we're kind of showing it off more, hopefully it gives people, if they've been hesitant with Gutenberg or something, I mean, this stuff should prove that it's here to stay.
I just saw an advanced WordPress because people don't go on Facebook anymore. I go to Facebook to check, if my grandfather messaged me or something, and I got an alert. It's like your group, popular post. It was on advanced WordPress. And I was like, what? Am I in a time machine? Someone said, just tried to build something in Gutenberg. I already hate it. And I was like, it's 2023. What year? Like, who? Yeah, I was like, come on. It's like, and I get that some stuff in Gutenberg is frustrating, but the one thing I learned at like, it's out, and I hate to say this, it's like, guys, like, go and code in any other system like React. I'm working with a React team right now. They forgot metadata for SEO. They forgot to send header calls, like page header call. I was like, guys, how is any of the marketing MarTech that we're plugging into this thing going to know like that there's things are changing, whatever. And you take WordPress for granted, right? And I think a lot of people like, Gutenberg, I think we've gotten so fat and lazy, and maybe that's why WordPress jobs have notoriously paid low, that it seems so easy, right? And now, I have to plan for dependencies. Look, I don't even update my phone until I know that dependencies are going to, break, right? So it's like, I think like, the idea that we should be able to like do anything whenever we want in WordPress, it makes people go, WordPress can't do that. Look at all these things we're doing. It just takes a little patience, and then knowing who to talk to. Like, look at that Medium article. That's a college education right there, and like architecting advanced APIs. That article like blew my mind when I saw it. I was like, oh, this is actually like and again, like when I was getting into WordPress feet first in 2015, that was one of the things that I would always look back on and be like, here's what you can do with an API. Here's the power of APIs.
Yeah, I honestly, like, I think all of us collectively, the first time we dove into Gutenberg was kind of like, and it doesn't matter if your first time was today or, 4 years ago, because it's a massive change, right? So, and inherently, I just feel like humans hate change. Like we just don't, right? Like, look at every time any service we use online changes their design or UI. It's just a complaint fest for a month, and then people are like, okay, this is the new whatever, and we get used to it and we move on. Gutenberg's kind of the same way, but once you just get in there and kind of like give it a fair shake, forget what the old whatever you used to do is. Come in with just no kind of preconceived notions, just give it a fair shake, and look at how other things are interacting with it, like, the larger premium plugins and like the services that are out there, because I mean, it's light years ahead of where it was when it was released, so, and it is the future, working in classic editor or doing some kind of weird combination of page builders and other things to try to, get the Gutenberg kind of flexibility is, that stuff's gone, or it should be. It's dying, I should say. Gutenberg really is the future.
Yeah.
But cool. So let's kind of wind down here. I'm curious. Do we have any resources? Are there places people could go to kind of see this type of stuff? Is it back channels in Slack, or people talking about it online? Is there like a showcase? I know the WordPress showcase is just WordPress, and it's mostly of the stuff we talked about that we're used to seeing. Marketing sites, websites, blah, blah, blah. But like, I'm curious where we go for inspiration around stuff like this. Where are people talking about stuff like this? Do we know? Is there places?
Birgit has so I would always select everyone, like I would go to Gutenberg Hub, run by Birgit, right? But I don't even know, and Birgit, if anyone's talking to Birgit or listening, like I'm not, like it's funny to me because I'm like, I haven't kept up with Birgit, and then I used to rely on her, right? And then, but I don't know if she's been able to keep up, because that's if you think about it, like what you're doing, right, Seth, like it's kind of not that it's in a vacuum. You are sharing graciously on Twitter, right? But it's like keeping up with who is now doing something. Because I used, Brad and I, we used to be talking about what we did and sharing stuff. I haven't shared, I think I'd done a Gutenberg demo of what I'm doing in WordPress in like 2 years, and I've been doing cool stuff, right? And that's the thing, finding people who are willing to share, but then also able to share, because like you said, Seth, you can't share the code.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and I'm looking at, I'm on Gutenberg Hub, and it looks like it might've been sold, because now it's just like, I don't know, like all the stuff I'm seeing is like how to create stacking sections in WordPress, how to create a stunning blur effect with generate blocks. And a lot of it is no code stuff, right? None of it is like, here's how we're doing this, wild thing you've never heard of. And I don't think Gutenberg and that's what Gutenberg Hub was before, but it looks like now they're kind of like getting into the whole, like, hey, for people who were not, new to WordPress, here's how to do this, right? Template builders.
The wild things changed, right? Initially with Gutenberg, a wild thing would be just having Gravity Forms work with it, right? Like, okay, Gravity Forms now supports Gutenberg. That was the wild thing. That bar has, been raised significantly. And I think we just raised it even more on the show of showing that stuff's great, but that's just kind of basic stuff at this point. Back then, groundbreaking. Gutenberg's new, getting all these things integrated. But now it's like, sky's the limit. Let's talk about the cool stuff we're doing. So I think we put this out as a challenge to the community, right? Like if you're working on interesting things with Gutenberg, put it out there. It doesn't mean you need to release the code. Obviously we love it to be open source, but I get it if it's not ready, or if it's just a proof of concept or a prototype or something, but put it out there, share some screenshots, put it on your blog, put it on Twitter, show people the amazing things that you're doing with Gutenberg and the block editor, and things that are really kind of outside of the box of what people expect from WordPress, and the types of sites that we're traditionally known for. So put it out there. That's the only way we're going to do it is presentations and podcasts and meetings like this, where we're just showing things off. Like, look at this cool thing I built. Look at this cool thing I built. We all love doing that. We're in tech because we're curious, and we like to learn, and we like to see what people are doing. And sometimes you just need to get those juices going by looking at what other people are doing to really get that fire under your own butt, to really, step up your game and start pushing the boundaries of WordPress.
I apologize. Gutenberg, it's not Gutenberg Hub, Gutenberg Times. And Birgit has been. She wrote something April 29th, and she has in here like WordCamp Asia, 8 Gutenberg related talks, open AI block, like a bunch of different stuff in here. So she does a great job, I think, of Gutenberg, right? And the one thing I'll say, if anyone wants to share with Gutenberg, and actually Seth, I would say connect with Birgit. Because Birgit, okay, great. Yeah, she does a great job, one, getting people excited because she's so curious and she's excited. And also, like, she publishes in public. And when I was, at really active in Gutenberg, she wants to know. And I was like, I customizing for clients, et cetera, et cetera. This is unfortunately one of the few resources, I guess, right? There's not, and it used to be the guys from Delicious Brains, they were putting out cool stuff, but not really Gutenberg, but they were doing really. And I would even borrow articles from them for large architecture stuff, because they were one of the first ones showing, like, in my opinion, Composer, Gutenberg, CI/CD, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you're right, Brad. We need to challenge the community. So let's tweet that later. Get some.
Yeah, we'll get it on the WP Friday hashtag for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up. Seth, where can people find you online? They want to follow along. Maybe they got some questions, anything like that. Twitter, websites. Where are people looking for you?
Sure. Twitter's the best place. It's where I've been sharing a lot of stuff, because people need to know what is possible with Gutenberg and WordPress. So I'm at Seth Rubenstein on Twitter. And I guess when Blue Sky is public, you can find me on there too.
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky. Victor, you on Blue Sky?
No, send me an invite. Let me in.
Man, you're so behind.
I know. I'm not cool anymore, man.
Yeah, it's Twitter basically from like 5 years ago, I think. Which it's actually nice only having like 10 people I follow and see.
Yeah.
It's calming. All right, Victor, where can people find you online? You still on Twitter?
Still on Twitter. Just Google Victor Ramirez WordPress. Not Victor Ramirez without the WordPress because it's the John Smith of Latinos, and you'll see a serial killer and an artist.
Just a bunch of
and
serial
like other
killers.
people aren't me. Yeah, there's like there's like
just all serial killers and one really advanced WordPress developer.
Yeah, Victor Ramirez WordPress, and you can find all my links.
Yeah, well, search me, Brad Williams WordPress, because if you just search Brad Williams, you'll get a comedian of the same name, a little bit shorter than me, but Brad Williams WordPress. I'm Williams BA on Twitter. For Victor and Seth, this is the WordPress Friday Hangout, hashtag WP Friday. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week with some other fun topic. Hang out, check out Twitter. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.
Later. Thank y'all.
Bye.
All right, we're good. Thanks for joining, Seth.